retailers, as they look to the future, really need to consider how to bring it all together and be able to offer the items that their consumers want through the channels that they want. Symphony is in a great place from providing technology to retailers that really focus in the areas of machine learning and artificial intelligence. Being able to take advantage of those capabilities, as well as an end-to-end supply chain, is something that supply chain managers really need to consider as they look at how to do business in this environment.
So hello everybody and welcome back to the Trade Squad. This is episode 5 and we've got a really fun one for you today. Jen is here with us as well as my co-hosts Audrey, Ross, and Leah. We're all back to say hi. We're going to be talking about some really good hot topics today. So stay tuned. But first, let's hear from Jen. Jen, tell us all about you.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me. It's exciting to be here. Thankfully, I got my invite from Audrey, so she gets all the credit. So we happen to know each other from the Organization of Women in International Trade, where I proudly serve as the president of OWIT International. And I was lucky enough to sucker Audrey on my executive team, and she's been phenomenal on it. So that's my loving job that takes away 50% of my life. But my paying job is I'm a board certified customs and international trade attorney. So I handle U.S. laws and all sorts of U.S. federal government agencies. So I'm going to give you guys some quizzes as we go through, because you would not be, well, I think you would be shocked at the amount of crazy fun laws we have in the U.S. that companies have to comply with when they're importing or exporting. So I deal with both the compliance side as well as the more common, oh no, I'm in trouble, help me right now side. So we get all sorts of fun phone calls.
That is awesome. So we have got a panel of some powerhouse women and women in supply chain today on the show. So let's get this started. Let's kick this off. Leah, you're going to kick us off with the topic that you wanted to talk about today. So what are we talking about?
Well, we're starting one of many exciting topics. We're starting with negotiating with your suppliers and what you need to do. And again, coming from that wheelhouse of small to mid-sized companies in particular, what are some things that you need to look out for? And if you don't have a lot of leverage, are you still able to have a successful negotiation? So that's what I'm kicking out to the group. To have, a conversation. What have been the experiences with that, and how can you keep an eye out and get the best deal possible? And so there's a lot to consider, and then I think one of the other things to think about is once you finally negotiated that agreement and maybe you've got certain stipulations within your contract, do you have somebody on your team to help you go through everything and make sure that indeed you're getting those discounts or whatever other negotiable assets you've baked into that agreement? So it's a lot for a small company to undertake, and wanted to have a conversation about that.
The thing that makes me happiest that you just said was the word contract.
Oh. Why is that, Jen? Tell us.
Oh, because you would not even begin to understand how many companies come to us to tell us, oh no, my goods have been seized. Great. Well, what are your terms? Do you have a contract? No, I have a commercial invoice.
Yes.
That's terrific. That's really terrific. Good luck is usually the words that come after that, because in the majority of cases, you have companies that are purchasing, for example, from China, right? Not a shock. And good luck having an actual contract or terms or a purchase order with terms and conditions. I mean, nonetheless, a real contract, please, that it's very rare for those small mom and pops. When you just start, you're so excited about an idea and bringing it to fruition and selling it.
And
that God forbid, right. The website will take up $10,000, but God forbid you would spend any penny on protection and legal protection in any way, shape, or form. You know how many people we see importing individually with their own social security number? I want to vomit all over the place.
No.
I almost die when I see these things, but it's a matter of, at the end of the day, if you ever want protection when things go wrong, because for the four of us, who has seen things go wrong?
Well,
Yes.
we're in supply chain.
Yeah, all day, every day.
Exactly. All you're ever doing is fixing things that have gone wrong. So if anybody has the expectation for things to be fabulous and perfect 100% of the time, they're insane. It's never going to happen. So at the bare minimum, memorializing whatever the terms are of your deal, it's essential. It's essential, at least starting there, because the question is, somebody in China supplies you product, you don't even get that product, then what happens? Who's responsible? Who's liable? What's your Incoterm? You know how many times I say the word Incoterm and people look at me like I'm black and blue?
And there's new ones coming out next year.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the next podcast.
Yeah. No, that's a really good comment, because I think the point that you bring up is, yes, small business in particular, in the excitement of the moment, trying to take advantage of what seems like we can't miss this opportunity. Do you recommend that contract negotiations have the opportunity to take a pause and confer with legal counsel, or do you bring an attorney to the contract negotiation? What's the best thing in that moment?
Either one I'm excited about, as long as I don't have to keep hearing I found somebody amazing on Alibaba and I'm sold. So what more is there to do? Like, who cares about due diligence? They looked great. I loved their page on Alibaba. Life is good, right? I mean, how often do I hear that? And at the end of the day, do you wonder why you have a counterfeit issue?
Such a good point.
Well, and I was going to talk about the negotiation part. The funny thing is, right now I'm listening to Chris Voss, his book about negotiation. I don't know if anybody's heard of it.
Yeah.
And he used to be like an FBI negotiator. And so he's talking about his tips and tricks on how to negotiate. And we're talking about contracts. I mean, at the end of the day, everything is negotiated, right? And
of course,
so
I just Googled him.
Yeah, and he's
very interesting. Yeah.
He's extremely interesting. And it's remarkable how simple the tweaks are to really start that negotiation and be successful at the negotiation, no matter what you're doing. And so I really think that's kind of the starting point with suppliers is, yes, we end up at a contract, but to start, it's a process, right? And especially if you're dealing with other countries, they have different ways of doing business. And you need to look at, what a gift means to them. A gift might not be a gift. It might be looked at as a bribe, or like how you take their business card, or different things like that. And I think that leading up to that contract, there's so much work that needs to go into it when it comes to negotiation and building that relationship and looking at them as a collaborator instead of an adversary.
Reminds me of the book Kiss, Bow, Shake Hands, which I thought was phenomenal. But think about how many suppliers you never physically meet.
Right.
And how much now happens via webcam / email / WhatsApp and Skype and so on.
Yeah.
So there's so much communication that happens virtually these days. But for the in-person communication, I highly recommend the Kiss, Bow, Shake Hands, because you give your business card to a person in the wrong format, you wear your hair in the wrong format, you wear the wrong clothing, and all of a sudden you have a business deal that just broke up like none other, and you don't even know why.
Right.
Yeah. Audrey?
Yeah, I mean, all those points are great points, and even for the really small, the micro to small enterprises, even if you can't get kind of a lawyer to go over your contracts from the beginning, there's lots of resources that you can find for what to add in. Some of the key things that you think are a risk for your business. The Incoterms are a great start, but just making sure you've got it explicitly in writing and get it, you sign off on it and get them to sign off on it. At least that gives you kind of, something. But yeah, once you are starting to get bigger, it is really key to have, see if you can get a lawyer to give your kind of contract format or your template a once over, so that you're not missing anything key. Those legal resources are there for a reason, and they seem really expensive, but they're not as expensive upfront as litigation. Yeah. Yeah. Something we have to watch for too, like we operate globally, so many contracts that you want to watch for your jurisdiction. And I've gotten some good tips from an expert trademark lawyer here in Toronto. And you want to, sometimes your own jurisdiction may not be the most favorable jurisdiction. So that's something to watch out for too. Like there's little nuances to kind of every piece of your contract. So there is a lot of homework to do, but it is absolutely worth it.
What would you, Jen, just before we wrap this one up, what would you say to startups, you know, that are maybe, you know, they're looking down the nose of these contracts and maybe don't have the funding to potentially, I mean, let's face it, let's be realistic here. What would you suggest that they do?
I've seen so many great Incoterms, for example, cheat sheets online with who bears the responsibility, seller, buyer. It's an awesome chart and it shows you. I think things that you think that are mandatory to get in there. So who are the parties? Who's the buyer? Who's the seller? Parties is always like first thing on a contract. Who are we really talking about? Who are you actually doing business with? At a minimum, a Google search of that company. Do they really exist or are they just some BS website and they have no presence? Like you actually Google the address. You know how many times Customs Googles the address, they see a landfill or something like that, and they're like, really, you're manufacturing in a landfill? That's phenomenal. Like, is that realistic? So that'll take you about 2.5 minutes, and that's like a worthwhile Google search to at least start due diligence, and guess what? That's free. Then you think about the terms. Like, how long do you want this to last? Do you want to be able to break up when you want to break up? Like, what do they have to do when they supply you? So think about how you want to do business with these people and what do you require. I would love people to put in there like no freaking trademarks you don't have the right to put on commodities. Like if you don't have the right to stamp Apple, please don't. Like, you know, what do you want? What are the specifications for anything you want on your product? What do you have the rights to use? What do you not have the rights to use? Anything along those lines. And I mean, you don't need to be a lawyer to think like that. You just have to think of who, if you had your own brand, would you want somebody else using your brand without your permission? No, that would probably really piss you off, wouldn't it? Because it should. So it should be the same for anyone else. So think about the specifications, the terms, how long you want this contract to last, and what it takes to get the hell out of it. If it's not a fit, how do you break up? You know, before you get married, you want to think about, unfortunately, what it's going to take. Like, if you break up, who gets the dog? Well, I get the damn dog. Well, is that in writing? Because otherwise, who's going to fight about the dog? You know, and whatever else you have to fight about. But, you know, you want to be sure at the end of the day, you get what you want out of the agreement as much as possible. And what Audrey was saying with jurisdiction, and if we are going to fight about it, where are we going to fight? And think about where it's in your best interest to fight. And good luck for a normal everyday person to understand about courts and what specific jurisdiction. That good luck dealing without an attorney. That's going to be impossible. But then think about, well, do I want to get on a plane and go to China if I want to fight you? Probably not. So think there. Do you want to hop on a plane and go to another country to fight someone else? And if you don't have the funds for a lawyer for a simple contract, do you have the funds for a plane ticket to go to another country to fight somebody to get what you want? So I think those are some minimal aspects that you should put pen to paper on.
We had that conversation. We were talking about that where it's like, you know, you hate to think of it up front, but you really do have to think of what's my exit strategy? What happens if this goes bad? Like, you know, you really do get into that, you know, kind of exuberance and excitement about what, oh, this is all so new and we're excited. But then, you know, it's so important to have that. What happens if we in 2 weeks hate each other and we decided to break up, or if things just aren't the best fit? And I think, you know, that's the key part of, you know, and it can be hard for really small businesses because, you know, they're very tied to their brand, but business is business, law is law. And, you know, you really have to think pragmatically and reasonably about these things before they happen to you and before you get caught up in them.
Right. So we on Let's Talk Supply Chain last week, we asked, what is your criteria for selecting vendors, which kind of goes hand in hand with negotiating with them, right? And so we had a lot of really great responses and sort of like a checklist from different people as to what they go through with their suppliers just to vet them in the first place, then go into the negotiation, then the contract. So I think we've got a couple of different steps here and some tactics that people, businesses, supply chain professionals, startups even can really start to implement and make sure that they're covered when they are negotiating with suppliers. Do you have anything to wrap this up with, Leah? I don't know.
Well, I thought it was kind of interesting that if you're a small company, there are these ideas around purchase bundles where either you convene together sort of a consortia of other, you know, businesses that want to pull from the same supplier, or you leverage a relationship with a larger organization that has better leverage. and take advantage of some sort of partnership agreement, not partnership, but an agreement with that purchaser that if you're a small company allows you to take advantage of those larger resources. I don't know what that would look like. You know, I could imagine potentially a legal nightmare if you got a lot of small companies together trying to negotiate a larger contract. So again, something to define in the terms. But it is an interesting notion that I think we see more of with these companies coming together and trying to take advantage of supply chain opportunities, shipping, et cetera. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely not something that I had really heard about, but it absolutely makes sense. And then if you're looking at it from a legal standpoint and negotiating it,
Jen's like, no.
Well, I mean, to me, the first thing I think about is confidentiality, because now you've got 1,000 different brands. Hopefully, I mean, if you think about being in bed, for example, with the Chinese supplier, then I think about how we got into this trade war to begin with and intellectual property rights issues to begin with. And it's just like, all right, well, where's our confidentiality? Like, who's breaching what? Like, let's talk about the beginning. You know, what kind of proprietary information are you providing to the supplier in order to make whatever your good is? And do you have them under lock and seal, like to not tell the world about what it is you're doing? They can't do it on their own and have a back of the truck section for your item going outside the factory. It's just, I think about all the things that it can potentially go wrong, and that's the part, you know, God forbid I should ever think of, like, you know, rainbows and butterflies and beautiful things, but all my brain ever thinks of is like worst case scenario.
This is why we wanted you on the show. Let's get real, people. Yeah. We are getting real supply chain professionals, getting real for real supply chain professionals.
Because like Sarah and I heard Leah, and it was like collaboration, so exciting.
And I heard,
and it was like chaos. No.
All right, Jen, it's over to you. You want to talk about CBP seizures, who, what, where, when, and why. Let's do this.
How many seizures do you think took place in 2017? That's the most recent seizure data that we technically have.
Oh, I guess this is the last time. 30,000?
So close. Audrey, Leah? 34,143 seizures took place specifically for intellectual property rights disputes. Wow. Now, when I say this, that could mean a trademark, it could mean a copyright. So Customs has one of the coolest programs that I think not enough people take advantage of in the US. When you think about your brands, you know, everybody has a brand that sells an awesome product. For your brand itself, you can protect it in the US by going to the United States Patent and Trademark Office. I feel like everyone in the world kind of just gets that. You get federal protection, USPTO, you're good to go. But people often don't think about step 2. Step 2 is recording a registered trademark. Good luck saying that 10 times fast, but recording a registered trademark or copyright with US Customs. Then US Customs is your personal policeman at ports of entry. How many ports of entry do you think you have in the US?
Oh, yeah.
57? No, 100.
No, there was more. There was more because all the land ports and the other ports.
Yeah, and
not just like LA and New York.
You got it. 328. That's a lot of ways in. So now you have 60,000 plus CBP officers at 328 ports of entry, and you get to tell them how to police your trademark or copyright. Copyrights are harder than trademarks because copyrights, you don't get all the juicy info. Trademarks, it's all publicly available, super easy to look up, super easy to police. So you basically, in your recordation application, you get to say, Customs, here's how I want you to police me. Here's where my goods should actually come from. Here are any of my subsidiaries. Here's who has the actual right to import. Here's where the country of origin really should be. When you don't see this, or the mark should look exactly like this. Well, these 34,143 cases, seizure cases, they come from recordation. So the juicy part is when the Nikes and Fendis and all the hot brands of the world, when they record their brand, what I see quite a bit of are electronics, for example, in Florida, it's quite popular. So you have China manufacturing, companies in Miami, for example, importing to sell to Latin America, for example, but it transits via Miami. So one of the most popular fun questions when it comes to seizures is, it wasn't intended for the US, so Customs should just leave me alone, right?
Yes.
Super cute. Right, of course they should. They should, but they don't. And why wouldn't they? Because think about it the opposite. If you had your brand registered and recorded in the US, and US Customs physically in the US, when your plane had that cute little layover for gas, well, when they saw saw your physical goods and they saw copyrights and they saw counterfeits of whatever your trademark is, why wouldn't they stop it? Why wouldn't they police it? They're protecting U.S. persons, right? They're happy to protect them. Who cares if you're transiting? The minute you touch U.S. soil, you're SOL. Out of luck. So within these 34,000 seizures that took place for intellectual property rights disputes, what do you think the number one seizure was? 15% of the total was for what type of commodity?
Fashion.
Booyah.
Yeah.
She's got it. Wearing apparel and accessories is numero uno. Watches and jewelry, numero dos. Footwear, number 3. Electronics, number 4. And consumer products, number 5. Those alone make up about 50-something% of seizures. And, of course, the number one country offender, let's take a wild guess here. I know this is going to be very difficult for you to figure out.
Oh, China.
What a shock, right? So between China and Hong Kong together, it's almost 80% of the seizures. So that's a hell of a lot. And every other country, it's 1% and less, you know, by the time all is said and done. So the MSRP of the goods, the value of the goods that were seized is about 1.2 billion. And now on top of that, when it comes to China, you're talking about one of the 1.2 billion just about, you know, coming just from China and Hong Kong. So it's a crazy number. So when it comes to custom seizure cases, the part that fascinates me the most is when we go through the detention phase, how it works with customs is first they'll stop the goods. And by regulation, within 5 days, they're supposed to give you a notice, and then they're supposed to have 30 days to discuss and figure out, is it counterfeit, is it not, is it legit, is it not? There are a whole lot of processes that technically we have per regulation. Reality and regulation are sometimes two like fabulously different things. So I look at the regs consistently and compare that to an actual case. The times that they're followed is a whole different story. But the reality is, if you get a detention notice, that's your time to proactively try to fight and try to talk about why your goods are not counterfeit, why your goods are legitimate. The reality of our world is how often do you not purchase directly from the supplier? There are usually some middlemen in between. That's more reality these days. So is it harder to figure out the actual origin? So you may have what's called gray market goods. This is such a fun, juicy topic too, where they're legitimate goods coming from an illegitimate channel. So I may be a supplier in China that has the rights to produce whatever sexy, whatever thing, somebody pick a widget, fine, but I'm supposed to just sell it in China. But then Audrey persuades me and says she really needs it in Canada, and I'm a sucker. So I say, great, Audrey, it's all yours. But I'm not technically supposed to sell it to Audrey. But more so, technically, my contract states I'm supposed to sell in China only, but Audrey's just so persuasive. What could I do? I'm selling to her in Canada. So I'm breaching my contract with whoever I have the rights to distribute my product to, but technically it's not an illegal importation if the gray market isn't restricted. So now let's pretend Audrey's in the United States. Now the question is, can U.S. Customs seize that merchandise? And if it's not gray market restricted, they can't. But if they detain it, then I may need a lawyer to get involved to tell Customs that my sale to Audrey, for example, when she was the importer of these goods, was a legitimate sale that Customs shouldn't stop because it's legitimate gray market goods. And then they may need her supplier and her supplier's supplier and the whole chain to be able to figure out that it really is legitimate goods, which is so fun and so juicy. So you got 30 days to try to piece that together. That sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. Then you have a seizure case. That seizure case then can turn into all sorts of 6 months to a year worth of fun for your life. And then if that doesn't work, at the end of the day, you lose that merchandise, then you can have a penalty on top of that. And this is my last fun question for you. If Customs issues a penalty, what's the value of that penalty? What do you think? So let's say this was one of my favorite cases. We had a client that imported fake Fendi this, Chanel that, Burberry, whatever, you name a sexy brand, they imported fake versions of it. So the goods were seized, and then they had a penalty issued for about $4 million. And $4 million was the MSRP value. So now imagine he bought this Burberry, Coach, Chanel, whatever thingamajiggy for $50, but the MSRP, what do those fun bags cost, right? Think about that, 5,000, 25 grand, however much. Yeah. That's the actual amount of the penalty that CBP can issue at the end of the day. So mitigating those is like tons of fun.
So what did you do for him? Were you able to get
We got it down to $4,000.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay, so the moral of that story is you need to hire me again.
Hire Jen. Oh my God.
DTL to the rescue. Yeah.
So I guess one question I have for you, because my head is kind of spinning because that was a lot. Was a lot to unpack.
I do that.
Yeah.
But truly, truly great information. So I am just getting into the trade game, right? I'm just starting to import, that kind of thing. I'm not looking at counterfeit. It's legit products that I'm buying from China. What do I need to be worried about? What do I need to be doing from
China stamping? One of my last calls that I just had before this is, oh, I bought these wonderful cell phone cases from China. I love them. I told them no trademark, but they decided, it's a cute little manzana. It's a cute little apple. Let's just put it on there for you. Well, that's so kind. So kind. Wonderful of you, China. Thank you. But who asked for that? And what happens? The goods are detained, soon to be seized, going through this whole process, and then soon to have a penalty thereafter. So I created the top 10 tips when importing that I have on my website on Diaz Trade Law. The idea behind the top 10 tips are like your hot items and what to think about. You could be small, you could be large, doesn't matter. If you import, period, the top 10 tips, number one is who regulates me, and think about your suppliers and think about your federal government agencies. In the US, how many federal government agencies do you think you have that regulate imports and exports?
Oh, this is like over 100.
It feels like it.
Yeah.
But it's like 47 federal government agencies. So it's a lot. Wow. And sometimes you can have 5 regulating one product, which is intense. It's like all sorts of fun and intense. But on the flip side of that, it's, do you get samples in advance? Like when we talk about our contracts at the beginning, like what do you do to get specs and to know what it is that you're ordering? So when it comes to intellectual property rights, I say, show me a sample. At a minimum, show me a spec, show me something. Tell me what you're going to be sending me, especially as it relates to IPR, because unless you specifically approve a picture, and I love to see that actual picture on your commercial invoice or packing list or PO or whatever, and some sort of doc, show me the spec and show me that you physically ordered it without any trademark or logo on it. Right. Show me that you at least asked. I mean, if you looked at it, then who reviews that? One of my other favorites is, oh yeah, we get our specs, but our salesperson reviews it. I'm like, great. What experience does this person have in reviewing trademarks and understanding counterfeits? Oh, none. I'm like, oh, well, do you think that that's a really good use of this person's time? Or do you think someone with a little bit more knowledge on intellectual property rights should be in the role to approve a product before, you buy it? So, maybe. It's amazing. The things you hear, the things you hear.
Really good at negotiation.
It's phenomenal, right? I know. So he's in charge of everything. Let him run the company. Kills me. But at a minimum, if you review a sample, then the question is, who's reviewing the sample? Who's signing off on it? Yeah. Can that person even be trusted to review the sample? What do they know? What experience do they have? Customs has an awesome website to look at recordations. What I was talking about, that recordation program, everyth's public, same as USPTO, it's all public.
What's that website? Do you know offhand?
It's CBP IRS. So I'll show you, CBP IPRS. And when you go to it, it's iprs.cbp.gov. It's the intellectual property rights search. So iprs.cbp.gov. Super easy. Yeah. How do you not memorize that, So then
we'll try to have that link when we put this episode.
So many small businesses right now are like, so anyway, I'm going to stick with wonky as my primary market.
I know. It's like, what do you want me to do? You want me to search? Like, who does that for me? Can't the supplier do that? No, better yet, my customs broker. No, the customs broker has to do everything. That's my favorite. It's, I paid them $100 for the entry, so they're in charge of compliance. They get, what do you mean? Government agency? Who cares? My broker has got this. Every day.
Have you had any horrible experiences with this, Audrey?
We're a bunch of control freaks here. So no, we send them the spec that we want. We look at the samples, they better match exactly what we want. So really, we take a really strong hand and strong view on what we want. And it also helps our business model is we're not just importing to sell. We've already sold something. So we've sold a product to the customer, so it has to match. what they've ordered and what the specification is, and even if it's a whole program. We have seen, we run into at export when we're doing some of our more high profile customers and bigger brand names that China export customs themselves will ask us for brand authorization letters. So we get to go to our customers and get them to approve that either Orchard, under our name and under the specific manufacturer name are allowed to import with this brand name for this particular project. Like it's not a blanket, anytime. It gets very specific. The letter is very specific, and it often comes from a bigger brand's legal department. It's like, yes, we'll approve this, but under these conditions.
What about
how many
seizure?
employees do you have?
Oh.
How many employees do you have, Audrey, just to give a little mix?
Oh yeah, we have almost 90 employees. So, and we have a China office. Once we got to be about a certain size, it's just, we made the investment in having a China office. So we actually can utilize our China office to go and do the sample approval on site in the same language, with the same criteria that I'd be looking at something, they would have those criteria. But
you have QC.
Yeah. Well,
which is phenomenal.
We have extensive QC and QA. But there are ways for like a really, we were really small. We relied on third parties. So there are third party companies out there.
I've seen Bureau Veritas-y kind of things where they inspect prior to. But the fun part is don't expect them to take the blame if it gets seized anyway.
No. Yeah, it's still on you. It's still on you. You've got to review those with a fine-tooth comb. But you also have to try and think of it too, because you, and most of the time, are giving them the criteria, unless you're working with a bigger brand and they'll have their own criteria to give to you. So if you are working with a big brand with a brand name, they may have criteria for the inspector. But certainly there are still resources for those small to mediums. It is just thinking of what they don't know, right? So it can be a real challenge to come up with what you don't know.
I think that's the hard part. The hard part is the things that you don't know, and actually developing your team of the right professionals that should be surrounding you to assist you when you think like, I've got a great idea, I'm just going to buy it, I'm going to go for it. It's great. Life is good. And you don't think of the different people that you actually need in your corner beforehand until you have problems, and then you start building your team. And then Right.
Yeah.
And then you're everybody. But that is such a challenge for the entrepreneur as well, because for us, it was, seeing you've got to be able to make those risk decisions. It means bigger growth. In general, there's lots of research. I mean, especially coming out of Canada, because we really have been a heavy on import country. So now there's a real emphasis on exports. And so there's, we're lucky we have some government resources that we can follow. But it's so worth it, right? So you see the numbers of the difference between countries who just do, or companies who just do domestic business versus those who do exporting business. It's worth it. But it's just a little bit more diligence and homework to find who you can interact with, where the resources are.
No pain, no gain.
Well, for sure. You have to have a terrible project. Yeah.
Before we do final thoughts, do you have any funny stories from a seizure or anything like that was just a complete nightmare?
Oh my God, I have 1,000. Where do we begin? I have like my wall of shame somewhere. I can go get a hoverboard.
Okay, well then Jen, let's make this your final thought. Give us like the worst example of a seizure and then we'll go on to the next one.
Okay, so this is my favorite. If you give me a second, I can actually show you. Do you want to see it?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, hold on.
Yeah.
I love it. Actually, I've had a couple of small companies that, said, oh, but they were so nice. The supplier we talked to in China was so nice. And
way worse than that. Way worse.
Yeah. And then the company is trying to just follow the lead of their supplier, and then they get in all kinds of trouble. So
the sooner you realize your supplier knows very little and is also not responsible after it gets to the warehouse, no matter what your Incoterms, the better off you'll be.
Oh my God. Yeah. All right. Ready for this? So how many government agencies do you think this cute little sexy thing has governing it? And let me tell you, inside that cute little noise you hear,
is it candy?
Candy.
So it's all 47.
So
Smarty
the first agency that we always think of that's at the border that I told you could record a copyright or trademark with is which one? What agency?
Customs.
Right. So Customs is number one. Perfect.
Yeah.
We have a food. So who's that?
Food and Drug.
Food and Drug Administration.
FDA.
And now this is a cute little toy intended for children under the age of 12. So now, who do you think?
Oh, what do you guys call that?
Consumer Product Safety Commission,
Oh, yes,
CPSC.
yes.
So this was my poor client's first importation, right? The guy had always been buying domestically and said, oh, there's such a good deal. I'm so excited. I could get this thing so cheap. Why would I pay the middleman? Who cares? Let's do this, right? So exciting, right? Awesome. So now you have a handlebar, and you see this little handlebar is broken? Yeah. So what is that? A choking hazard. Good job. So now you're going to kill a little child who's going to choke to death on a bar. Awesome. So imagine how happy the Consumer Product Safety Commission is, right? Then you've got cute little logos all over here. So imagine how happy U.S. Customs is when one of those is recorded with Customs and you don't have authorization. Then you've got candy inside of it. And guess what? When it comes to food products, they have to have approved colors. And his cute little candy is green and purple and yellow. And guess what? All those cute little colors are already fading. And this has been a couple of years sitting here. And why are they fading? Because they weren't approved colors and they're not technically safe to consume. So now you have an importation that comes into the U.S. that U.S. Customs seizes, that CPSC separately wants to seize and issues a nastygram discussing how you're going to kill a child for having a choking hazard, and FDA separately is yelling at you saying, thanks so much for your unapproved color, way to follow our FDA regulations, I'm separately mad at you. So then you have the seizure case that takes about a year and a half, and are you getting this back? No, I mean, I work all sorts of miracles all day long. I can tell you hoverboard stories where I even got some of those that blow up back. But after taking out the blow up batteries, fine. But this, how do you get this back? What could I salvage? You know, you can't salvage the food. You can't I mean, maybe the tire, you know, at the end of the day, there's nothing you can salvage with this, right? So FDA, we have to salvage on one end. CPSC, we have to salvage on a second end and talk about the fact that this is our first importation and we're now going to care about not only small parts violations, but also the testing that needs to happen for any children's product under 12 and the certifications that are required. And then CPSC, CBP, you have to separately work with. So now we had a seizure case, then we had a penalty case because of the IPR violation that happened after the fact. So his first importation took about 2.5 years to finally resolve. Awesome, right?
With no product to sell, no
product.
Did he cry? Because I think I might have cried.
That works out of Ralph's in Illinois.
Yeah, we became like BFF at the end of that, and I got some really great candy that he bought domestically, and he got a really good lesson about importing, and he buys domestic from now on. Importing is not his friend. I mean, here's the bottom line. Can you just import whatever you want at whatever whim, do zero compliance whatsoever, not care about federal government agencies, and think that there are no repercussions? I've got a lot of laughs for you. And this poor guy was one of them. He said, I'm buying domestically. Why would I need to pay this guy more when I can buy it myself? And there was no thought process in, well, who the hell am I dealing with? What federal government agencies regulate me? What do I have to do to import a compliant product? Should I request a sample? Should I look at IPR? Should I care about this? Not even getting into the actual classification, valuation, country of origin. I mean, good luck. I don't think made in China is anywhere on here, and that should be. So, I mean, there should be separate violations for country of origin
Look at
marking.
Audrey's face.
I know. Juicy, right? I love this case.
All right. Well, that was a ton to unpack, but I'm telling you, the information that came out of that one, wow. And if I was that guy, I think I might have cried for at least a couple months, maybe. And then, like you said, never import again. So the next topic that we're going to talk about is mentorship and associations. And I think that we can talk about these somewhat separately, but together. I have been asked a lot of times because I have the CITP designation from FIT, the Forum for International Trade Training. I also have the designation from Supply Chain Canada, formerly SCMA. So I get asked a lot, and I don't know about you guys, but I get asked a lot, you know, what's in it? What's in a designation? What's in an association? Why should I belong? And so I kind of want to throw it out to you guys because I think this is a dual question. Because one of them is, you know, there's not enough money and time to go around to be able to be a member of every single one. And I think we really need to talk about that today, because I think it's really important. And then the other one is why to be a member of an association and what that does for me. And I've done some research in the past, and I know for myself, you know, you're networking with like-minded people, and you can more easily find mentors and people that you enjoy spending time with. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there, but still a little bit more to unpack. So I'm going to throw both of those situations out there, and whoever wants to jump in, go ahead.
Well, I can say, first of all, being part of these different organizations, the District Export Council or sitting on a board for the World Trade Center or what have you, are critical for exactly a lot of the things that Jen just mentioned. If you find yourself in a situation suddenly and you have no idea you're in above your head, what a fantastic opportunity to take advantage of the expertise around you, or have one of your colleagues introduce you to their network. So I think it is so critical to have access to people, because international business just generally is so huge, and then you splice that out into all of the different categories. So I say taking advantage of the knowledge is number one for sure.
For me personally, OWIT struck a nerve with me when I first graduated and started practicing, and I was told to get out there and make friends and bring in some business. And the harder part for me is I'm 5'1", I look like I'm 12 sometimes, and especially, you know, almost 15 years ago, I looked like I was 2. So when you get out there and you're starting to meet people and trying to have people take you seriously and to think about your expertise and so on, I found I was in a room of sea of like older males, and I was like, all right, this isn't going to go very well for me here. Like, everybody keeps telling me I look just like their granddaughter. That's awesome. Like, are you giving business to your granddaughter? Because then I'll be her. Sure. Like, are you hooking the granddaughter up? Like, let's bring on some importers. So when I first stepped into an OWIT room, and it was all women involved in international trade, they were warm, they were welcoming, there was a broker there, there was a forwarder there were other importers there were marketing people, translators. It was like a whole network within a network. It was a banker. It's like if my client needed an international banker, needed someone to translate docs, needed a broker, needed whatever, it was all within a room, and you started developing your own personal network. Then the beautiful thing about the network itself is we have partnerships with other organizations like FIT, like the National Customs Brokers and Forwarders Association, like WeConnect, like Grow Your Biz, like XM Bank, Vital Voices, and so on. These partnerships like WEG, for example, are great because our association members now get access to these other memberships as well, and other trainings as a result of it. I found for me personally, the other network that has been really helpful over the years was the Bar Association network. And for me, it was the American Bar Association, the international section. I got to meet a lot of other international attorneys, because the biggest thing at the beginning, especially for younger lawyers, is growing your network and being a valuable resource. So when your client needs something from you, with the National Customs Brokers Association, with international lawyers, with OWIT, you're able to, like, if somebody comes to me with a recommendation, or they need a recommendation for whatever and whomever in whatever country, it's only a couple of emails or clicks or calls away before I get somebody who rocks for them. And that's indispensable.
Yeah. Absolutely. What about you, Audrey? I want to hear about, you know, what are your thoughts? You and I are a part of FIT. We're both a part of OWIT as well. And through my association with FIT, and they're both amazing organizations. And then I want to pose the question as to, you know, how do we decide on which one to join? You know, where do we spend our time and money?
I think for me, because I didn't graduate from university, and I didn't graduate in something that was like a kind of a professional field, right? So like Jen, being a lawyer, you know, you kind of have that built in. You have a bar association, and when you get your documents for being a customs broker, like a licensed customs broker or an accountant, there are, you know, every year you have to manage getting your hours, right? So there's a requirement to your professional designation that you keep up with a certain amount of you know, retraining or knowledge or hours. You know, but for other jobs, you know, I think does SCMA require that now for supply chain? I think some in the supply chain.
Yeah, I think they do a little bit.
Yeah. So, you know, once you start to figure out, you know, if you start like me and it's like, oh, what am I going to do? I don't know. You know, there are such a variety of groups, but if you really want to hone in on what you don't know and who you need to know, kind of that's where I started. Fit just made the most sense because I was in a business that was doing business globally and somewhat accidentally ad hoc and and stumbled into things. So for me, having that variety of knowledge, that's why I look to Fit. So kind of honing in on you know, if you don't know what you're looking for, then something that offers you a variety is great. If you kind of are in a certain field and you know what you're looking for, then getting really specific to that maybe silo division like supply chain, accounting, law, customs brokerage, or logistics, forwarding. You know, that might be your tactic. But it is something to think of. It's like networking, you know, when you kind of are coming out of school or when you're looking for a job, it's do this networking. It's like, how do I do that? You know, join this association. How do I do that? But it really is kind of just sitting down and understanding that it's going to be part of your career. It's not necessarily a chore, and you do meet amazing people and make great friendships in it. So
yeah, and I think each
super
one
valuable,
and they offer different things, right?
Yes.
Like
yeah,
some offer the training, right? Some offer the networking in specific areas like OWIT, right?
Yeah.
For women in trade.
Or people who support women in trade too, because we do have some men in our membership.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
We have a test. It's a very, very strict test.
Yeah.
Are you a man that supports the advancement of women in international trade?
Yeah.
And if the answer is yes, then wide arms. You are welcome to join.
Yeah.
Okay, so then my next point is about mentorship then. So I get asked, I don't know about you guys, but I get asked all the time if I could be somebody's mentor. And, you know, while it's very flattering, it is also time consuming. And I want to make sure that I can provide, because I'm somebody of my word, right? So if I'm going to say that I'm going to give that time to somebody, I want to make sure that A, it's being put to good use, and B, that I have the time commitment to be able to do that.
Yep.
And so I don't know about you guys, but I put out a little test and I asked them to do something first, something really small, because if you're not going to be able to do that, then why am I putting my time in? And I know that might be a horrible thing.
I love it. What's your test?
Yeah.
Let's hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I asked them to, I think one of them I asked to read a blog. I said, can you go read my blog? I just want to get some opinion on it. You know, is it too long? Should I have made it into a 2-part series? Can you just give me some feedback?
You want me to read?
It was a 1-pager.
Yeah.
And how many people don't read it? That's the fun part.
And I never heard from them again.
Yeah.
Yep. It's quite often. It's interesting. That's one of my tests for law clerks. Like when they come in, I'm like, your first day, like one of the first things I want you to do is give me top 10. Give me 10 ideas for future blog posts that are some hot topics in international trade, things you're interested in, and I'll call you. Okay. Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a level of, and I hate saying this because in some instances there's just like laziness and entitlement sometimes. It's like, I deserve to have somebody help me, but I don't want to put in any love or work into the mix. And it's like, what? How does that work? But I get a lot of people that ask for legal advice and career advice and what should I do? And I'm interested in your area. It's so sexy. So few people do it. I'm like, all right, you want to follow me around for a day? You want to like see what I do? Sure. Like, all right, let's talk. But it's, so many people just don't want to put in the love or work. And if you actually give everybody that asks you something, some sort of test, I would sadly say 70+% won't perform and don't want to do anything in return for what they ask. And they're asking as an ask without an expectation to have to do something separately to give back in return.
But that's the word, right? Is the expectation is that you should want to and have the time to and need to do it. And I don't have any problem doing it, but I think there's got to be skin in the game on both sides.
I agree.
Not only does there have to be, a synergy between the two, right?
Yeah.
We've got to have some chemistry, otherwise it won't work.
Mhm.
But there's also got to be skin in the game. If I'm going to put in that much effort, you got to put in some effort first and show me that you're really interested and that you're clear on what you want from me.
There's a huge misperception about what mentorship is.
Mhm.
Mentorship isn't me giving you free coaching 24/7 to help you get
It's
ahead
not?
in life. That's not what mentorship is. That's not what it is.
Yeah.
You know, like you see it a lot with younger people. Find a mentor, and you're like, okay, that's very vague. It doesn't give you a lot of details.
What do you do? Right.
Right. And this misperception that it's like, it's personal coaching 101. Now it kind of is, except it is not in a vacuum of I go to this person who's older and wiser than me and they're going to give me this personal coaching and I'm going to get ahead. No, it's relationship building, right? And it is relationship building in a way that is bigger picture. It's I have similar values and ambitions as, I would say, Sarah's my mentor. I didn't ask her. I just kind of kept interacting with her until now. I'm like, she's my mentor, whether she likes it or not.
Oh, that's nice.
You know, but it's so you keep.
You didn't know.
Yeah, you didn't know. Surprise.
I think that's it,
Right? Surprise, Leah, you're my mentor.
I think that's so true, though, because I know that there are people that I've really admired from a distance, and they're a little far removed for me to access in terms of a mentorship conversation. But I did exactly that. I made sure I went to all of their presentations. I found out what type of certifications they had, and I went and got that. You know, whatever I could do to try and model after them.
Yeah.
So when I did finally have an opportunity to engage with them, I could be in that space where we were having a conversation that started to provide me with all of those insights that I wanted to take away from that. So
Yeah.
I think another biggie is, and people don't realize this, but another biggie is even a conversation can be a mentorship-like conversation where not everything has to be so formal. You know, it's not like, oh my God, I have a specific mentor. We meet every Tuesday at 5. Like,
wait, can we note that Jen said not everything has to be so formal? Because this is the
mentorship-wise, only mentorship-wise. My caveat is mentorship-wise.
This box of mentorship.
Only this box.
But I'll
because
tell you,
how many people do you help in your career that it's a small help? Then how many people help you in your career? You can consider that like a mentorship type opportunity that you have with somebody, but it's not necessarily a formal specific arrangement. Like if somebody contacts you and says like, I loved your blog on this. What do you think about this? You could be mentoring them on a topic and not even know it. I mean, you were mentoring Audrey and didn't know it. I mean, I think we have a lot of relationships like that come across where you communicate with someone and you're sharing ideas and concepts. I mean, there's some women we just, commiserate about federal government agency injustices and we're mentoring each other in some way, shape, or form. And I think it happens more naturally. And I think what you were talking about, Sarah, with that natural relationship and actually liking the person is so huge. Because if you don't have a bond with the person to begin with, if you don't want to talk to them, and if you don't want to have any sort of engagement with them, like that's not a fit. But there are people in your life that you can be quote unquote mentored by. Just somebody on your list of phone numbers that will actually pick up your call, that will actually answer your email, that will actually be there for you, and vice versa.
Yeah. And I'm gonna give you an example of that because I was not well paired with this person, and after the first mentorship that I did, I was supposed to do 3 with this person.
Who said you had to do 3?
There was like a thing.
Yeah, it was part of this. It was part of this sort of contest that I said that I would help out with.
Yeah.
And so after the first one, in the first one, I had given so much detail and I had given some truth bombs and given some doses of reality and was like, you need to. And I was ghosted after that one. Never got to do 2 and 3. And it's because
too much work.
I very well could have overwhelmed that person by the information that I was giving them.
Yeah.
That's how I have conversations. I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to give you some doses.
That's
of
why I like you, Sarah.
And you know what? It just wasn't the right fit.
Yeah.
And so not all the time are you going to be the right fit for everybody in the way that you speak, in what you're saying, that kind of thing. So
I just bought a t-shirt and I have a little girl crew. We bought a t-shirt. We all bought it together. So when we go to our next conference, we can wear it. It says, I'm not for everyone.
Yeah. I love it.
We all did. It's like we're our own special brand of crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like in our specific world, you deal with so much intensity on a day-to-day basis,
Yeah.
and you have to be a rock to so many people, and so reliable, so dependable, and so accessible, and so like on it, that if you're going to talk to anybody in time that is not allocated for work, that better be a valuable piece for both sides. Otherwise, like, I need to watch nonsense TV or something else to turn my brain off.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
I'm happy with that. I watch a lot of nonsense TV.
Or there needs to be like, you can buy me lunch.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Make it a good one. I mean, for that, I don't want to leave the office if I'm bored out of my mind sitting there trying to talk to you for an hour. If I'm giving you big spiels of information and you're looking at me like you're staring at a wall, like that doesn't do it for me either.
And be
Imagine if you had that conversation Sarah had where you're giving him all sorts of truth bombs and the person's just like, I'm dying now. I'm going to go. Like,
I'm never speaking to you again.
yeah.
All right. So who has their shakers, bells,
Oh, yeah.
what have you ready? Oh, you've got your candy. Nice one. Nice one. Because it is time for some supply chain trivia. I think we need some music to that. Like,
Here we go.
you
do.
All right. So the first question is, which of the following is true for supply chain management? A, the physical material moves in the direction of the end of chain. B, flow of cash backwards through the chain. C, exchange of information moves in both the direction. And D, all of the above.
All of the above.
D.
Ding, 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 ding. All right. That was Jen?
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, next one. Logistics is the part of a supply chain involved with the forward and reverse flow of goods, services, cash, or all of the above. Audrey.
Goods. Services. All of the above.
All of the above.
Yep, it's all of the above. Ding, 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 ding. Another point for Jen. Okay.
I just move goods.
Yeah.
Really.
All right.
Then
Half
that's
a
all
point
that's
for Audrey.
important.
All right, let's see who knows their 3PL. 3PL stands for A, 3 points logistics, B, third-party logistics, C, 3 points location, or D, none of the above.
B.
The-
All right, that's a unanimous win for everybody. All right.
although Audrey was first technically.
Yeah,
I
because
wanna give her
I was
credit.
like, you don't even need the answers.
Yeah, right out the gate, Audrey knew.
Yeah.
All right, we
My
got
life
two more.
every day.
The next one is my favorite truck driver slang. What does grossed out stand for? A, you've hit an animal crossing the road. B, your meal at the truck stop wasn't very good. C, your vehicle weight is at maximum capacity.
Oh, C makes the most sense.
Ding, 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 ding. All right. Last one. The total footprint of all Walmart stores is similar to A, the island of Key West, Florida, B, the island of Montreal, Quebec, or C, the island of Manhattan, New York.
I would think bigger than that.
I'm gonna say Manhattan.
Ding, 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 ding. And that is supply chain trivia for today. Thank you all for participating. All right, and that concludes that concludes our episode of the Trade Squad for today. Want to thank Jen for joining us. And
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun being here.
yeah, and so much great information, some facts about your importing. I mean, that was great.
Yeah.
And of course, my lovely, beautiful co-hosts, Audrey and Leah.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.